Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ontario Public Transit Association OPTA Live webinar series. Thank you for joining. It is my pleasure to thank our sponsor for today's webinar, Siemens, and our guests from Siemens today, Ray Little and Teresa Cook. These webinars cannot happen without this sponsorship. So thank you very much to Siemens for both your sponsorship and your leadership on this topic. Ray, can I turn it over to you now and remind our presenters that everyone was muted and you will need to mute and unmute yourselves. Over to Ray.
Hey, thanks, Karen. A special thanks to you, Karen, and the OPTA Maintenance Committee for organizing this event. I know it was a little bit of work. I'd also like to take a moment to give a special shout out to Andrea McKay, my colleague at Siemens, for her help in organizing this. You know, my name is Ray Little, and after having spent 3 or 4 days with a variety of colleges across the country, sharing with them what I knew about the training needs of the mass transit industry, it occurred to me that it would be helpful to have an event like this where industry stakeholders could connect on the topic of training in the e-mobility environment. And so I just asked Teresa Cook from Siemens to kick us off here. Teresa.
Thanks, Ray, and hi, everyone. So there's a new car game at our house when I'm driving I have 3 little girls and we're driving around the city, and the new car game is Spot the Electric Bus. And I just let that sink in for a minute. Our game is Spot the Electric Bus. We're making it happen. There's buses and our kids are like, does it have a straw? Does it not have a straw? The straw is like their word for the exhaust. And it's just so exciting. So thank you. It's happening. And you know, we also all love the bus, right? The bus is big. The bus is visible. The bus is the center of the user experience. I took the bus to school. It brought me to school every day growing up in Toronto. And at the same time, I think we're growing in our collective understanding of the high degree of interdependency in making bus electrification work. The analogy I like to use is a flower. You want to plant a flower. You can go and buy the best amazing seeds from the best seed manufacturer with the best supply chain, and you can make sure your seeds are available on time, right? But if you put them into soil that's crappy, you don't put sun, you don't put water, that flower is not coming up. And so when we look at the systems today, I think we're growing in our understanding of all the elements we need, which is the funding, which is the power, the charging infrastructure. But above all is the people. The people are our sun, our water, and our soil. And so what we need today is people who are also kind of a new generation, a new thought, a new way of thinking. These people are trilingual. And I include all of us. All of us have to become trilingual in fleet, in electrical, and in digital. So that's a whole new skill set, right? And on top of those kind of traditional domains, these are all the people, and all of us have to be so skilled in humanly connecting with one another, breaking down silos, because this is a whole new space, a whole new game, overcoming fear, and constructively problem solving in the unknown. And so that's why I'm so excited for today, because this is the conversation we need to have. How are we going to develop ourselves and all of the thousands of people that are going to be needed to make this whole dream, this whole vision happen? What skills? How do we develop those skills? And when can I go to the first graduation party? So thank you so much and look forward to the discussion.
Hey, that's awesome, Teresa. Thanks very much for opening it up. Everyone, I'm just going to share my screen here quickly to share an agenda and our objectives for today. Hopefully you all can see it there. We do have a robust roundtable of panelists where each of the panelists have selected a series of predetermined questions that they intend answering over a course of 5 minutes. And each presenter will take their 5 minutes and speak to their subject matter. Of course, this is followed by an open forum where you, the audience, would submit through the chat feature questions for each of our panelists. And finally, Karen is going to submit in the chat a link to SurveyMonkey. And that corresponds with the objective of this workshop, where we're hoping to solicit volunteers to serve on the OPTA Training Committee. So I know Karen will post that link into the chat. And for those of you that are interested in serving on the OPTA Training Committee, we invite you to use this survey link to submit your name and your interest in serving. And so with that, I would poll the crowd. Did Bill Barr's Zoom link work? And have you joined us, Bill? Okay, I don't think that Bill's joined us, and he was our first speaker. And not to be outdone, Josipa Petrunic, I would invite you to open up the roundtable session here with your session pertaining to training. Josipa?
Thank you so much, Ray. And so I've gone ahead and shared my screen, and I'll just get the thumbs up from the team there if it's in full mode. Great, sounds good. So I'll move through pretty quickly because we've all got about 5 minutes, and it's my pleasure to be here. Great panel lineup to talk a little bit about what we've been seeing on our end. For those of you who aren't familiar with QTRIC, I'm Josipa Petrunic. I'm the president and CEO of QTRIC. We've been around now for happily 6.5 years. We're coming up to our 7-year anniversary. I'm really proud of that. And these are the 4 areas we work in. The first 2 are going to be relevant to what I say today, that zero and low emissions propulsion technology systems, so battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. And the second pillar is our autonomous smart vehicles project with York Region and the city of Markham right now that we've been building on the case studies across the country. There's a whole other discussion about the readiness of trained staff at transit agencies for the big data component, the data collection, data analysis, and the cybersecurity that comes with all of this. But for today, I'm just going to talk about the propulsion systems, the energy systems, and for the autonomous vehicles, a little bit about the DSRC communication systems. So the big question that I'm looking to answer, and that Ray, of those questions that we'll be answering today, what are those current training challenges in relation to deploying ZEBs and autonomous vehicles as versions of ZEBs? Mostly because the smart vehicles we're looking at are mini electric shuttles, so electric buses. I'm going to go through just a couple high-level things, the things we have learned over the course of the last few years, and also gleaned from our partners in Europe, which is why I've included a European electric bus image there. They're a little bit ahead of us in terms of the training and the skills building, because they're a bit ahead of us in terms of joint procurements. So what we have seen in the last 4 years, in particular in our bus program and now in our fuel cell bus program and our autonomous vehicle program, there is a skills gap analysis at most transit agencies. Happily, the federal program that was announced just before the election should provide some funding for transit agencies to do a gap analysis of who do you have on staff and who will you need. That's going to be important. But from our experience, the majority of our transit members have not had a chance, unless they're large transit agencies or mid-sized involved in a program of deployment, to do a full gap analysis of the labor on their team. And here I'll go beyond operations and maintenance to management as well. In the words of our colleagues at TransLink, they thought it would take 3 or 4 people to deal with the electric bus program that we deployed there. At one point, there were 30 people on that project alone. And that's a large agency like TransLink, where they've got a lot of people with a lot of skills. And it was that complicated that the team kind of ballooned. That's pretty common. If you ask any transit agency that's deployed these systems, it is going to require a lot more people at every level than you ever thought, in particular in the first few years. The second thing is in 2016, 2017, we did a college program. At QTRIC, we have a lot of colleges in our membership: Centennial, Conestoga, Red River College, great colleges that train a lot of great people into transit agencies locally. And what we found across Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia at the time was the colleges weren't ready to launch new trades or certification programs in this space, because there was nowhere to send their student interns. And it became a chicken egg situation. there was nowhere to send those student interns. And so the program couldn't be created. But unless the program were created, as soon as the buses started, there was nowhere to employ people from. So that chicken egg situation is getting a little bit better now because there's places to send students. But now we find our college members are all running to catch up to deploy programs that can take up to 12 months to design from a curriculum standpoint and get certified at the provincial level. Then there's the last items we're seeing of the balance between how many people in your current operations and maintenance team do you upgrade in-house and launch in terms of an investment effort to train people who currently work for you, like mechanics into electricians, totally new trade, and how many people do you plan to recruit from the outside world, from college programs that may or may not exist right now. And there is a hot market right now for the few people that are actually exiting either the educational landscape or a transit agency that actually have these skill sets. So those labor constraints are critical, but those people are high value individuals because they're so few. The last items I'd note is we will see electrification is going to happen the fastest in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, wherever there's an LRT or subway system, you're going to get the most amount of rapid, efficient deployment, largely from the operational side of the equation. And that makes sense because of the electrical engineering services and skills. But if that doesn't exist already on your team, then your transit agency is another delta step backward. And that is really hard to overcome in a short period. The last thing I'll say we discovered at Q-Trick in our projects is the consumption by the auto sector. So those folks who are coming out of colleges or universities with the right skills are being consumed by really high paying jobs in the auto sector in the EV market. And that connection of colleges that may have electric vehicle training programs to transit electrification hasn't fully occurred across the country. So I'll just conclude there by noting we've learned these things from our electric bus project that deployed in Brampton, York Region, and TransLink, and that was 18 buses fully deployed with 7 overhead chargers. Everything that can go wrong has gone wrong, and that is right. That is exactly why you do these first deployments. And all of these agencies would confirm, and I'm sure many of them are on the line, that the teams they've had to deploy internally are a lot larger than they ever thought they would be. Here in our project on the fuel cell bus side, we've learned the same thing. And so that is on track right now to learn for those same technical skills for hydrogen fuel cell. And lastly, in region of Mark and York Region, where we're looking at deploying these autonomous vehicles, there's the additional need to now hire people or recruit people who understand communications, dedicated short-range communications, and 5G networks. All a little bit challenging in the short term, but all necessary to deploy anything beyond a few buses in an early pilot. So thanks very much. And hopefully that helped to give a little bit of insight into what we've learned from these early deployments on the skills and labor side of the equation.
Josipa, the energy you bring is really appreciated, and I especially appreciated the point that you made with respect to scarce resources on the human side. So, and the competition for those resources. So, really appreciate it. Our next speaker, Chris Hossey, has managed the battery electrical vehicle support function at Novabus since the introduction of the LFSE to the Canadian market. With 12 years experience in the aftermarket service group at Novabus, Chris provides a solid understanding of the challenges involved in integrating battery electric buses into conventional public transit fleets. Chris?
Thanks, Ray. Here, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully, I'll hit the share button. And everyone can see this slide with my big picture on it.
Yeah, it looks fantastic, Chris.
Great. Thanks, Ray. So as Ray was mentioning, I've worked at field service at Novabus for 12 years now. So I've spent a fair amount of time in the workshops on the shop floor and worked with a lot of good technicians and mechanics. About 3 years ago, I switched to supporting our field service managers across Canada who are deploying the electric buses. Montreal, Toronto region, and Vancouver. So let's jump ahead. The approach I wanted to take today was maybe there were some questions asked that I think would be of interest to the group. And I'll go ahead and maybe give a little bit of my thoughts on it, and hopefully that will help everyone. So one of the first questions that was asked was around unique technical skills that technicians are going to need to stay ahead of this transition that we're making into full electrification of transit vehicles and buses. And I've sort of five regions or areas that I thought of. And the first one, and the one that we take the highest priority, is safety. So in working with the transit agencies, especially the smaller ones that maybe haven't had the experience with hybrid vehicles, I've noticed there's a lot of apprehension around the high voltage. We're working at upwards of 750 volts DC in the buses. And so for mechanics or technicians who haven't had that experience, there's always some apprehension around that. So in terms of technical skills we'll need to develop is, we as OEMs, we provide lockout, tagout, decommissioning procedures to make the buses safe. So technicians are going to be able to need to follow those procedures and have confidence that after they follow the procedure, that they know that it's safe to work on the vehicle, and there's no shock or risk of shock or arc flash. As well, some of the background training we'll need to provide is to work with the technicians so they understand what and what isn't high voltage on a bus. So not everything is high voltage on the bus. There's lots of jobs and tasks still in repair that don't involve touching the high voltage or working near it. And so maybe there are, some learning that needs to happen, some knowledge around what you can and can't work on. As well, under safety, we talk a lot about PPE, personal protection equipment. We talk about the use of gloves. We talk about knowing which PPE to use in certain jobs. Some jobs will only require gloves and eye protection. Jobs that put the technician at risk of an arc flash will require a higher level of PPE. So there'll need to be an understanding of how when to make that analysis, work with the OEM to make that analysis, and then to know how to properly wear, test, and calibrate that PPE. 4 other items I try to touch on quickly are diagnostics. So unique, the skills we're going to need to develop are what I think is often referred to as laptop first type repair skills. The industry has been going that way for a while now, but with these full electrified buses, they're complex vehicles, and really going to have to work with new technicians and existing technicians on being able to pull up the laptop first, make the diagnosis, and then make the repair. Following on that, technicians will need to have good skills in reading schematics. All the vehicle manufacturers lay out their schematics differently, but it's really important to understand them and be able to read and analyze them. Networking, the buses are fully networked with various data buses, 4, 5, 6 data buses running at different speeds. And if they're not operating properly, the vehicle won't be operating. So there'll need to be a good understanding of how that works. And then finally, I'm not sure if the schools are teaching this already, but the mechanics and technicians will need to have some good electrical background. Learning skills such as insulation testing, mega testing, that type of skill that they may not have had learning they may not have had in the past, but will be necessary to work on fully electric vehicles. And then I was asked what OEMs need to do. We will need to develop our diagnostic skills training, generally vehicle specific. We're going to need to develop troubleshooting trees and diagnostic tools for technicians. We integrate a lot of different systems from different vendors into the bus, and then we put the bus out there to be diagnosed and repaired, and sometimes it's a challenge for technicians in sort of doing their own integration, or the diagnostic tool doing an integration of all those different systems. And something we're working on, and I think the whole industry is working towards, is telemetry on the buses. So being able to remotely support into the buses and help the technicians wherever they may be, small shops, big shops, remotely diagnose and repair the vehicle. And then finally, I had some questions around infrastructure. I think the biggest one that I've noticed in working in the field is around working at height. So a lot of the systems have moved to the roof on buses, on the electric buses. We have batteries, battery heater, coolers, charging rails. They're all on the roof, and we have to be able to work safely at those heights and to be able to lift heavy equipment, heavy batteries off of those buses. And something that maybe not everyone has thought about, but is important to note, is when working at height, of course, we're worried about electrical shock hazard from the high voltage systems, but we're also very worried about arc flashes that could occur, which we may be wearing our full PPE, but it's human instinct to recoil from an arc flash. And then if you're at height and you're not protected properly, you could have a fall and be injured that way. In terms of other infrastructure, I thought of is chargers in the shop. So making repairs to the vehicles so that they integrate and work well with the chargers will be necessary. And so that there may be some need to install chargers in the shops so that technicians can finish their repair by charging up the vehicle. All right, Ray, that's all I had. I hope that helps.
Hey, Chris, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing your time and knowledge with us.
Absolutely.
We have another speaker now from a college, Professor Dan Vincent. He currently teaches electrical and electronics and fuel course at St. Clair College. Dan has vast experience in service repair and has been Red Seal certified for over 40 years. Dan received his motive power technician diploma from St. Clair College and a Bachelor of Applied Science from Ferris State. Dan is also certified in hybrid and electric vehicles. Dan?
Thank you, Ray, and thank you everybody for attending. I feel humbled with all this, all these people here. I will try to share my screen.
Hey, thanks, Dan. And I can see the screen.
Okay, and I'll first start with St. Clair College. Some of the people that are on this call may not know where St. Clair College is. We're in Windsor, Ontario. The southern part of Canada, and I like to call it the Aruba of Canada. Now, some of my friends in Okanagan Valley raise their eyebrow when I say that, but we are the nicest weather. Now, St. Clair College has an enrollment of just under 15,000 people, or students, I should say, over a series of campuses. I'll try to switch. So when Ray presented the questions that the colleges would have to answer, they are really intertwined together. So I'm going to, as I answer these questions, or as I speak about these questions in hopefully the 5 minutes that he's given me, they will be mixed in together, all the questions. And at the very end, at the summary, I will deal with each question individual. So the first question that came up was the time to need to develop new curriculum. Well, from conception to delivery at our college, it's between 18 and 24 months. Once you get the concept, you present it to the dean and the chair and the VP, and they give you the head nod to move forward. Then you get into a new program development proposal, which has 2 phases to it. The first phase is graduating credential. What will they get at the end of graduating? Also part of that will be the start date, the description, the reason why, what employment opportunities, and I'll just stop at employment opportunities. When we at St. Clair first looked at electric vehicles, electrification, you know, in my case, it was back in 2007, but 2010, when I first presented it, as we heard earlier, there wasn't really very many opportunities. So our college, St. Clair College, tapped the brakes and we didn't move forward. Now we see there is opportunity. It is a growing field, whether it's in light duty, heavy duty, or a mass transit, buses, there is an opportunity there. Once in phase 1, once we get done with employment opportunities, we have to now look at the colleges that are offering the same programs. We also have to include MTCU codes and NOC codes. Well, the MTCU codes are the Ministry of Labor, Training, and Skills Development, their new name. And the NOC codes are the occupational codes. One of the problems, there isn't any. So we're kind of breaking new ground there. So when we at St. Clair College started to look at vehicle electrification, whether it's light duty, heavy duty, bus, we found that there is no real training standard, and each training course can be a little different. So we all sat back and we talked and we said, well, what would the needs be today? And we come to the conclusion that we just don't need a person that can use a wrench. They need to have a great or strong understanding of electrical, electronics, software control, AC, DC, and we can add PPE in it. It can grow from there. At St. Clair, we are in a electrified vehicle development in the post-secondary, and we are decided to use the Society of Automotive Engineer standards. Not only will that be a provincial standard, that will be a national standard and an international standard. So anybody that looks at somebody from St. Clair, and hopefully it can grow within the province with my colleagues at other colleges, that there is a level of standard that everybody will have. So our program is a two-phased post-secondary program with a licensed technician program. So the first year program, the student will be successful and he will end up with Society of Automotive Engineer Level 1 certification. If the student returns to the second year, the vehicle, which will be more intense, more diagnostic, more thought process, more computer skills, more digital electronics, the student will end up with certification from SAE in the Level 1 and the Level 2. Now we also look at how do we get the licensed AST 310T people and 310S people certified. So we're tossing around a hybrid delivery where there's a certain amount of the course would be online and then a certain amount of the course would be face-to-face training. And the face-to-face could be evenings or weekends is what we're looking at, trying not to take the service technician away from the repair facility. When we enter phase 2 of this program, we have to—
Dan, I apologize. I'm going to interrupt just to give you a 1-minute warning here. We can come to some of these other topics at the end in the Q&A. So maybe if you can wrap up in 1 minute.
Oh, okay. We have to do a labor analysis in phase 2. Once that phase 2 is done, it has to be now approved by the Board of Governors and the ministry. So in summary, it takes about 18 to 24 months. The college will need help from both equipment, from manufacturers and industry, both equipment, components, sitting on our advisory board, and also making sure that we are producing the student that you need. I believe that the college is the best location to deliver EV training because of location, facility, equipment. Our apprenticeship board has indicated that there is no discussion for vehicle electrification for apprenticeship or service technicians. EV endorsement, which was part of the question, is really the government governing body, which would be OCOT, which is kind of rudderless right now. St. Clair, we're in phase 2 of an electrification of a vehicle, light duty, heavy duty. And of course, we are using the SAE standard. And yes, if a student is successful at St. Clair, they will receive EV certification from Society of Automotive Engineers. Thank you. I hope I didn't run over my time too bad.
Dan, that was really fantastic. And the whole concept about the SAE standards with corresponding levels of certification, that seems to make a lot of sense. And obviously it's well thought out. Next up for us on the panel are 2 different transit authorities. We'll begin with Grand River Transit and follow with TTC. It's really a pleasure to introduce Bill Barr, who's the Director of Maintenance at Grand River Transit. Bill also serves as the chair of the OPTA Maintenance Committee. And GRT is looking forward to a new bus garage where they plan introducing their first electric vehicles. I know Bill to be an avid cyclist and an active volunteer at his local curling club. Bill?
Thanks, Ray. Sorry, I was a little late getting on. I had some computer difficulties here this morning, but I did finally get on. So I missed the first part of the presentation, but I would like to take a moment and thank Ray and Siemens for sponsoring this important conversation. Much appreciated. We are starting, we have a tender out right now for 11 fully electric buses. The intent is to have them ready when we go open our new building next spring in Waterloo. Some of the biggest challenges we see in maintaining these vehicles is training of the staff, and that's kind of what this is about. Also, a lot of concerns about maintaining uptime. Of course, we all read with great interest TTC's report on uptime, and some of the numbers were a little concerning, particularly from a spare ratio point of view. In transit, we don't have the option to say, oh, we just don't have a bus to go out. One way or another, we have to have the bus. We're also, going to have to work in conjunction with our operations department and find out which routes these buses are going to work best on. We've had some analysis done by Q-Trick, which will give us a basis of that, but the rubber hits the road when you actually get the vehicles out there. The only other thing I would say is that I do have some concerns about OEM's ability to provide us with support with all the electric vehicles that are coming online. The OEMs have only so many support people out in the field. I know TTC is planning to buy a lot of buses. There's going to be a lot coming on stream. So I'm just hopeful the OEMs are going to kind of tool up and manpower up to make sure that we have the support as end users to make sure that we have the support when the buses come out. In regards to training, we have a tender out right now, and we've asked for the winning bidder to provide familiarization training for all 62 of our techs. And then we have a further requirement of 22 techs to have an 8-hour or 4-day, 32-hour training course, in-depth training. The larger challenge for us will be the ongoing training that'll be required to keep these buses going. Also, those who didn't get the in-depth training. So our hope is that through these types of conversations, we can get that training done at the local community colleges. We'll also need some training for our EMS folks. In regards to the 310 licensing, my only concern is that we don't develop a second license. Like we did with, we had the old Class A and they split it off to 310T and 310S. I would certainly be in favor of an endorsement, but hopefully we don't go down the road of another license. In regards to chargers, that'll be done by our facilities department. Again, we'll need training for those. We're looking for, about 6 staff to be trained, probably a 1-day, 8-hour course. And in regards to maintenance planning, when we put up the new facility, we'll have power to power up 11 or 12 to 16 buses. After that, we will need substations or microgrids or storage, battery storage, or whatever is going to be required. So that becomes a whole facilities project, because in my mind, that needs to be throughout the region as a whole, because there's lots of vehicles in the region that we'll be looking to electrify in the next 10 years. So I think that's all I have, Ray.
Hey, that's great, Bill. I really appreciate you flagging that important need for us on the manufacturing end to be ready to support clients with training needs and materials. So appreciate you raising that. Next up, we've got a tag team from TTC, Alan Pritchard and Sam Ferangi, where Al is head of maintenance and he liaises with the engineering team responsible for implementing the infrastructure to support TTC's current 60 electric buses. Sam's the manager of vehicle reliability and quality assurance and is currently responsible for commissioning a total of 60 electric buses from 3 different manufacturers. Sam's got a wealth of zero emissions experience gained at a variety of transit authorities and with the early Daimler hybrid buses. Al?
Thank you very much. I think you'll hear that Bill's points in the TDCs are very, very similar. The greatest challenges, I think Chris from Nova was spot on. Training on EVs is the greatest challenge and should be included and performed by the OEM and any electrical vehicle procurement. Above the typical driver training that everybody needs, maintenance staff requires specific training. Electrical safety, technicians and management staff need intimate training on PPE requirements and the maintenance of the PPE. As talked about, lockout tagout procedures and the use of the equipment. Getting on those roofs, ladder access platforms and the maintenance of those platforms. In the EV world, orange is the new red, right? So orange signifies high voltage. However, just be careful. Some car manufacturers introduce blue cables. As Bill touched on, don't forget about emergency fire services. In the event of a fire, they need clear direction on how to shut off the vehicle energy source and distinguish a fire if there happens to be one. And this also includes your facility infrastructure. The other challenge is talked about by Chris, electrical diagnostics. Diagnostics methods, including power control switches, HVAC systems. These systems all use high voltage cabling. And of course, the J1939 network knowledge. Basically everything on the bus now goes through that network. I'll just share a quick example of a bus issue we had. One of our e-bus fleets, there's 6 strings of batteries, right? So when the bus is charging, the state of charge on the dash shows the highest available amount of energy from any string as they're designed to charge in simultaneously, right? And discharge. So if a string is offline, the operator will not be able to tell if there is because there's no telltale lights to indicate this. So if the string is offline, you essentially lose 1/6 of your capacity. If the range potential is 200 kilometers, you're essentially going to lose 35 kilometers. And this happens unexpectedly. We found the bus shows a good state of good recharge for a majority of its trip, and then it falls very, very quickly. Comprehensive EV training, all technicians and maintenance staff, it's a must. They have to receive the electrical safety training. That's everybody in your shop. Everybody should receive that. As a reminder, techs want to learn about electric vehicles. They need to know what they can touch, what they can't touch, all those types of risks involved. How do you recommend preparing an operating procedure to provide guidance for your day-to-day operation and maintenance of the battery electric bus? This should include like preparation of revenue service, returning from service, daily servicing, and how you're going to perform your repairs and maintenance. So obviously a smaller percentage of our vehicle diagnostic training will happen to a few techs, but then as you get more electric vehicles, obviously you need to expand on that, right? So what's the best means by which a bus builder and the colleges can assist us? Well, I'll lean on the bus builder on this. Greater Canadian support, and Bill, you touched on that. For engineering and warranty technician support, the pandemic, I know, has caused a lot of issues here at the TTC, but as more agencies introduce these electric vehicles, engineering support to diagnose these faults is going to increase. So you guys need to be ready for that. You guys have, the manufacturers have proprietary systems that even they struggle to diagnose. And that also includes the HVAC manufacturers. So the OEMs, we need parts availability, make sure you have available components to support these vehicles, detailed maintenance modules. And these needs include, component maintenance service intervals, component replacement schedules, tooling and equipment requirements, And boy, it'd be really nice if we could standardize what these PPE requirements are. So are there specific courses we'd like to see offered by the colleges? Absolutely. Electrical safety training is a must. You can't overtrain in this area. CAN diagnostics, right? These vehicles don't have an oil leak to indicate, a fault like we're used to on the diesel bus. Most of not all the components now are CAN controlled as part of the vehicle electrification. Even the rad fans, the doors, HVACs, everything is on a network. Possibly greater emphasis on electrical system troubleshooting, greater than that 24 volts up to the 600, 650. That's a requirement. Are there specific items you'd like to see offered by a bus or charger OEMs? Maintenance needs to be included in their designs. What's the saying? Design for maintenance, right? We're the people that got to maintain them. You need to design them for maintenance. I'll talk about the charger maintenance later, but from the OEMs, detailed troubleshooting guides, they're a must. CAN signal transparency, standardization would be a huge benefit, for one manufacturer to the other. Everybody's a little bit different, right? And the safety requirements, as I said before, the PPE rating, we need to standardize that. So concerns in regards to change of the 310T licensing, Bill, thank you for that. And this is a great debate, right? So the ministry, in my mind, made unnecessary changes to the MVM licensing in '96. They split the license, as we all know. The transit bus technology is developed significantly, and there are many components in a bus that are not on a truck, and vice versa. So to help TDC deal with this gap in training, we partner with Centennial College to deliver our truck and coach apprenticeship in-school portion. I'll tell you, Centennial has been an absolute amazing partner. So the TDC and Centennial work together to get the enrollment of apprentices. So we have the ability to, we fill a complete class. We have over 90 apprentices at the TTC right now. The TTC provides the vehicles, the components, the literature required for Centennial. They teach on transit-specific applications. And this allowed the college TDC to fine-tune what we felt was that gap in the current truck and coach program. So getting back to that big question, maybe I'm old school, I like to bring back endorsements. One common licensing in the motive powered industry for vehicles, I think is appropriate for on-road vehicles. Maybe have that system tiered, advanced to truck, bus, and electric vehicle even, strongly support the endorsements. The TDC also operates subways and streetcars. There's no governing agency for these modes of transportation. We relied on the vehicle equipment manufacturers to support the training for our employees. We've been successful with that for many, many years. So what's our plan to maintain charging infrastructure? Well, I strongly recommend charging infrastructure should be maintained as your facility maintenance, and strongly suggest having manufacturer service contracts in place. Make sure in those contracts you have the availability of components, have out of service KPIs, et cetera, because these systems can and will go down. That it is a facility requirement. So when are courses needed and at what capacity? Well, immediately. As electrification is happening today, the TDC has had hybrids in our system since 2006, and I think that was a great introduction to electrification of buses. Almost all our technicians now are very, very competent at maintaining the hybrid bus. They know how to change traction motors, traction generators, everything that is a requirement in an electric bus now. So, I know everybody wants to get into e-bus right away, but breaking into the hybrid system first and then advancing to the e-bus, I think is a great way to go to help bring along all your technicians. So thank you, everybody. That's it for me.
Hey, Alan, that was great. And I really appreciated the point that you made about the standard operating procedures and how that could apply to day-to-day operations. So really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us here today. Next up is a vehicle manufacturer. Mike Mcdonald is the manager of New Flyer's Vehicle Innovation Center. He's been with the company for just over 4 years, beginning as a sustainable transportation specialist at MCI. Mike has a PhD from the University of Manitoba, followed by a postdoc at MIT, where he was managing projects related to novel materials for lithium-ion batteries and solar electrolysis. Mike, that was a mouthful, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you today.
Great. Thanks so much, Ray. And hi, everyone. And thanks again so much for having me here. I guess just to get us kicked off here, I thought I'd speak a little bit more generally just about some of the technical skills at first that would be required to sort of stay ahead of the game and live up to the demand of EVs. So obviously these are EVs, and so electrical knowledge is probably the most obvious, but also the most paramount. So skills there are not only are they needed right now today, but they're also definitely expected to change and evolve over time. I think that you could probably divide them up into two different areas, and you have the software side and then you have the hardware side. So just even basic knowledge of software systems, the software itself, some programming, troubleshooting, and commissioning have become, really important assets to this whole sector. Although, it's definitely noteworthy that this all kind of depends on the operator's organizational structure as well. So for example, you can't really expect every one of your technicians to become a computer programmer. I don't think that that's reasonable, but there might be some properties in the future that do adopt that sort of outlook. On the hardware side, it definitely can extend beyond computers. So just a knowledge of electrical systems and electrical architectures, and definitely standards was mentioned a couple times here already, and I couldn't agree with that more. So I want to echo it. So definitely base knowledge there on the hardware side and electrical systems is certainly important. I know the colleges have been, training electricians and electrical engineers for a long time. And so really what we need here in the industry are very good electricians and electrical engineers for cars, basically, or at least that's resembling the goal here. Looking a little bit more from the perspective of the local colleges and institutions, how can you support the EV industry? Certainly doing at least some sort of adjustment and update to your curriculum to support or enhance your present curriculum will be important, but I would probably argue that, a recommendation for a ground up kind of approach where you're tailoring specifically to the sector from the ground up would be preferred. So this is going to offer a program that's not only far more superior for the student, but also for the institution itself. So if you've put the effort in and can brag about your specialized EV training program here, this is going to attract better and more serious students. And so it really does you a favor as well. And there's a really good return on investment there. I mean, there's going to be a certain segment of students who are drawn to become diesel mechanics today, but who are going to be forward looking enough to see what's coming tomorrow with zero emission. And so they're naturally going to be able to assimilate. And this is a great opportunity here for me to shout out some of the work that NFI is doing in developing and designing an electrical technician apprenticeship program to work hand in hand with local colleges at all of our facilities across North America. And this is going to include, zero emission and autonomous vehicle technology as well. So that's the college side. Now let's talk a little bit about OEMs from our end. So what are we going to need to do to accommodate this? So it's basically the goal of the college, I believe, at least, to try and generalize the training a little bit. Every single OEM is going to have, their own MO, their own systems. It's going to become very specific. And so ensuring that handoff from going from very generic to very specific goes smoothly and properly, and we can give that in-depth training on our specific systems is going to go a long way to completing the training program. We also need to be able to prepare ourselves and adjust our expectations for these new employees that are being onboarded. So what are these new programs that are out there, and how does that change the skill set that the employees are having coming into us? And so just having that connection and that partnership with the local colleges that are supplying us with future employees is really paramount to understanding what those expectations are. Now thinking a little bit about, the post-sale aftermarket kind of area, what's needed there, what sort of support or changes to the current MO. And I would say that the most obvious would be education. And I understand that that's very general, but there are definitely gaps there that need to be addressed. Certainly physical changes to the existing infrastructure you had are probably needed, but they're probably far less than you're expecting, I think. there's definitely going to be a shopping list of things like, safety tools and PPE, and there are going to be some safety retrofits that might be necessary, but I can't really speak to that specifically because it's certainly on a case-by-case basis. I know that chargers for your home garage, for your property are, has already been mentioned. And so I'll echo that as being a really good example of one of the bigger ones. But basically customers expect special support for these. They're making a massive investment into these. And so we really have to be there for them every step in the way. And we tried, at least at our organization, to demonstrate that as best as we possibly can. We've done a full revamp of our service teams, both for all of our service products that we offer, as well as field support, and done a revamp as well for our training teams to make sure that we bring our customers' employees up to speed as much as necessary. Basically, I'll kind of finish on the note that, this doesn't really work if there's not cooperation across all parties. You can't really leave anybody out, and nothing looks worse for the entire industry than a down bus that no one's willing or able to fix. So we'll have to work together on that. And then lastly, if you'll grab me the time here, just a final note on the changes or the potential changes to the layout and capabilities of the facilities themselves and how they support heavy duty EVs. I just from our own experience, having been involved in the early days, there was a lot of improvising. The specialized tools that you think may exist out there, they definitely didn't exist back then. And as such, we've learned to improvise and deal with, existing infrastructure that a lot of facilities already have. And so to give you an example, forklifts can be used, with little or no modifications to be handling and servicing those really big, heavy battery trays. And so that's really a great example of it, that it doesn't have to be as cumbersome as you might think. And keep in mind, though, that a great portion of the maintenance you're going to be doing is going to be drivetrain independent. It's going to have the conventional parts and then, the wheels and the structure itself. That doesn't really change just because you change out the powertrain. And so the same tools that you'd be needing for maintenance of that doesn't change. Of course, safety is the first priority. So there are specialized tools and PPE like I had already mentioned, but certainly in this new age that we find ourselves in, the most important tool that you're going to have is going to be your laptop, because you have more issues with software than you do with hardware, because you have less moving parts. And Siemens has done a great job with the moving parts that they do provide in electric powertrains and EVs moving forward. And we've also made big investments with our telematics systems that was already mentioned. So our NFI Connect system, for example, to bring those early diagnostics to the fold as much as possible to assist with your maintenance activities. And I think that I've used up all of my 5 minutes here, so maybe I'll shut up, but thank you very much.
Mike, thank you very much. I really appreciated the point you made about having a base level of education with our technicians at colleges and being able to transition that to OEM specific training. So really appreciate the point you're making there. Next up, we have another transit authority. Chris Hill is the program manager and fleet planning at the City of Guelph. He's part of a multidisciplinary team working on procurement of electric buses and charging equipment for Guelph Transit's electric bus pilot project. Guelph plans to have electric buses in service in 2022. Chris, it's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Ray, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm bringing the perspective of a smaller transit agency to the discussion here today. Really appreciate the comments so far. I think this has been the most valuable hour I've had all week in terms of learning about all of the issues that we're facing right now. So just a little bit about Guelph. So we're a relatively compact city, and we think that bus electrification is going to suit our city quite well. We're just 89 square kilometers. None of our routes cross the city boundaries. As such, our principal destination is the University of Guelph, located in the center of town. I mentioned we're a small agency. We have 80 buses in service. They're all 12-meter Nova buses plus 13 mobility buses. We travel about 4 million kilometers a year. And we're doing bus electrification because our bus fleet accounts for about 35% of all greenhouse gas emissions from city operations. So this is a high nail for us, and we feel this is the best place to get started. It's not a new thing for Guelph. As with many other cities, we were involved in electric transportation a long time ago. Unfortunately, the last of our electric vehicles was retired in 1937, and all the skill sets that went along with maintaining those vehicles have long since departed as well. So we're back to square one in terms of learning how to deal with electric transportation. Our progress has spanned just over 2 years at this point. We got started in April of 2019, forming a discovery team that included fleet, transit, and our corporate energy group and facilities. We did go through the verification process with Qtric, modeling our routes to determine that in fact electric buses would work in Guelph, and received their final report earlier this year. During that time, we prepared for financing by receiving some funding from ISIP, keeping our council informed through reporting and workshops and such. And then earlier this year, we completed an RFP for charging equipment that was awarded to Siemens. And then just a few months ago, we did complete our technical specifications for battery electric buses. We have since issued an RFP for 40-foot battery electric buses, which is now closed, and we're in the process of awarding that. So just in terms of answering the questions here, I think all the previous speakers have done a great job of answering the questions that were posed to us here. If I can put one item up for on the table here, it's make sure that your parts technicians or your stock keepers or whoever is looking after your materials management and supply chain, make sure they're trained as well. They can easily become a weak link if they're not well informed about the components that are part of the bus electrification progress in your transit agency. So I think just in the interest of time, Ray, I'll yield it back to you.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the point you're making, that it's a complete circle when we support electric vehicles on the street. So really, really well noted there. It's a pleasure to introduce someone who's become my friend and colleague at Siemens. Mark Chillerhose is the Director of Product Lifecycle Management at Siemens Canada. As part of Mark's role, he and his team are responsible for the complete product portfolio of Siemens medium and low voltage, including heavy-duty charger equipment. Mark's also responsible for the battery-based energy storage business and customer services business in Canada. Mark?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ray. And I assume everyone can see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Good. Yeah, actually, all the colleagues that have spoke have really covered a lot of stuff here. So it's really just going to be playing on that a little bit, really on this transition of electrification, right? So really, I'm looking at this on the side of an inverter manufacturer, like for a charger. So while we're looking at buses and all this, I'm looking at more on the electrical infrastructure, electrical charger side, and kind of what that looks like as far as training of people and the people that you would have on staff, maybe not even just the technicians doing the bus maintenance, but also the people you may have on staff to actually help troubleshoot overall systems if there is a problem, right? So we look at this, the electrical safety training, discuss this a lot as well with lockout, tagout, troubleshooting of AC systems, DC systems, communication systems knowledge, because we do have 600 volts into this chargers, maybe 480 volts or 600 volt AC up to 750 volts DC. Plus 24 volt DC and controls, right? So with that as well, there's capacitors in there that hold charges just like the batteries do on the buses. So just knowledge on electrical systems of how those actually operate for safety wise and all that. On the software side, basically being able to connect to the charger, make sure that that's connecting to the bus, do interoperability troubleshooting if there's communication breaks in the link. And just basically work through the software to see state of charge of the batteries, successful charging operations, that kind of thing. Also onto the remote monitoring, we look at that side. Cybersecurity was discussed a little bit as well earlier, and just overall communication side. Also, there is PLCs, so we look at that as programmable logic controllers and automation. So there's sensors, the computers on-side, the PLCs, micro switches, that kind of thing, HMI screens that need to be interacted with. So basically, the ability to connect to all these different possible issues or equipment. The other side there is, we look at power electronics. So with the inverters, you do have power electronics. So you have thyristors, rectifiers, that kind of thing. So something that maybe a normal technician won't get into, but if you're getting into this kind of stuff with the electronics and actually working on an inverter, you'll be involved on that and just being able to kind of work through those challenges that you may see. And low voltage, medium voltage training. So, all this stuff, especially when you get into larger depots, as the electrification increases, more chargers deployed, larger kilowatt chargers, you're going to get into larger distribution. On the low voltage side, you may even have to get into medium voltage distribution. So just being able to understand the distribution side, if a low voltage breaker trips or a medium voltage breaker trips, are they able to actually look at the trip unit or the relay to see if it tripped on overload or short circuit? Is there an issue with the transformer, the power cabling? Just those basic things on the distribution side. And as well as on the mechanical amplitude, that's usually not a challenge when we look at depots, but when we get into overhead chargers, like the one that's displayed there, you do have moving parts, you do have springs. So if you do have one of the pantographs actually not be able to retract back into the home position, just being able to have that mechanical amplitude to kind of work through those challenges, as long as with the rails that are on top of the bus that they connect to. So a little bit on kind of an example of how we've kind of worked through this or worked through some of these things as far as the chargers go with the college. We're using this partnership we looked at with Red River College. So this is, where we looked at, input as more of a broader training as compared to like an instruction manual training type of a solution. So this is part of Red River's college's overall plan for their communal transportation electrification program. And with that, we have a charger there that'll, with the help with the environmental testing they'll do for the low temperature testing, be able to do interoperability testing with new vehicles locally. So be able to have buses there and actually do interoperability testing with the chargers, look at firmware testing, for software deployment and just overall testing of software challenges or bugs. And really a place to look at educating technicians and future engineers with respect to even the charging equipment, right? And really it is a community lighthouse, a good best practice one when we're looking at the overall greenhouse gas reduction sustainability targets and all this. Just good to be involved with this and be able to provide input to the curriculum with respect to the e-charging equipment, troubleshooting, maintenance, and just overall challenges that they may see with if a charging sequence gets held up or that kind of thing. Okay, and lastly, a little bit of kind of what we've done on our side at the headquarters. So this is our Siemens headquarter office in Oakville. And we've been looking and working hard these last year to try to make this a showcase for eMobility as well as microgrid and all this. So I'll kind of go through kind of what we've been doing there. But the Sunflower and Microgrid Controller with battery storage. So we have a system that's deployed, it's ready to get online. We have a solar powered charger there in the parking lot, as well as a microgrid controller with a lower scale battery storage system, just to kind of show how multiple power sources interact with a battery energy storage solution, which is really a real world challenge when we look at depots with electrification journey. As they get larger depots or larger power requirements, if there is challenges with the power requirements, this could be a good solution to look at alternative power coming in and how they kind of interact with each other. So this will be a showcase on that side on the microgrid controller, battery storage, and solar. EV level 2 and level 3 chargers. So in our parking lot, we do have those where we have them all integrated and monitored by a software system inside the building. So really the ability to book charging times for employees or visitors as well as just to see how that interacts and kind of what's happening on the vehicle side when they are charging. And the bottom one there is a really interesting one. So that's our overhead charging station. So we have an overhead pantograph that's being installed into the parking lot. And with that, we'll be able to do charging sequences, interoperability testing with buses, and actually do real charging with real equipment. Okay. Load optimization. So looking at sequential charging. So another challenge that buildings may have with not having enough power, so being able to sequentially charge the vehicles. So be able to show that in real time and do that. And really the next one's training technicians and engineers. This is a great place where we're planning to train our own people, our own field service people, our own engineers, our own project managers, as well as bring in customers as well, and other people that would like to see training, in real life of how this all works together. And last but not least is for those ones that can't make it to Oakville, having a mobile charger on a trailer that we can bring to different sites and actually show how that actually interacts, and be able to work on it and see in real life how that works. If we can't get to that location, this is another alternative where we can bring that equipment to them. Okay. So overall, that's kind of where I end, but kind of looking at the overall training and kind of what it means and how we kind of see it as far as the e-charging equipment is concerned. So thank you.
Hey, Mark, thank you very much. It's really great to see the collaboration with Red River there, where a manufacturer is making sure the college has the base knowledge to deliver those technicians being trained, and then of course having the OEM customized training on site. So thank you very much. Next up, we have Trevor Cox from Brampton Transit, where Trevor was a truck and coach connection and has strengths in complex diagnosis of electrical and electronic systems. Trevor also spent a few years involved in the former College of Trades at the trade board level. Trevor is now the maintenance reliability analyst at Brampton Transit, looking at diesel, hybrid, and electric bus problems with an eye to improving fleet reliability. Trevor?
Hi, thanks everyone for tuning in and letting me speak for a few minutes. There was a number of questions given to us for a guideline, and I've sort of come up with short answers for each of them. And I think a lot of the presenters have already covered a lot of this, so I'll try not to dwell too much. So one of the questions was, what are the greatest challenges that we've had with our 8 electric buses so far, as far as technicians trying to diagnose them, maintain them, that sort of thing. For us, just the learning curve, as people have said, about the higher need for that technical understanding of how things work on these vehicles, it's proved to be a steep learning curve for a lot of our folks. As far as what we've done for our training process at our Sandalwood shop, where these buses are based, we're giving everyone a basic course in how to drive the bus, how to charge the bus, and where you can go and what you can't do on the bus. Then after that, we've got a smaller crew of that will cover a variety of shifts that will get high voltage hands-on training, familiarization with the high voltage systems and that sort of thing. And then after that, we'll have a smaller group of those people who will get like full component level troubleshooting, that sort of thing. That's our initial plan. And over the course of probably years at this point, we're going to roll that out to as many technicians as we can in the shop. Currently, all of our training is being done by the bus and the charger OEMs. Because everything is so different on the variety of vehicles that we have, I think we really need that bus manufacturer hands-on training for now. Once things become more standardized with time, I think the colleges could play a greater and greater role in providing that training, and definitely for equipping people with that basic knowledge of how networks work, how the theory of operation of some of these things, inverters and drive units and that sort of thing. I also really like the TTC's approach of getting a college on board and having a specific training for transit. I think that's a great idea, and maybe something we should look at further down the road. Currently, the challenges that we've had with the training are, trying to get some of the information in advance of the vehicles arriving can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. Some of the PPE that's required, we've had hybrid buses since 2010, but some of the PPE that was is required was a bit shocking to us, pun intended. We spend about $1,500 per technician to gear them up for the electrical training that they're getting. And I share the concern of Bill and TTC about having like a specific license for an EV vehicle. In my view, it would be best, like was said, to go with an endorsement or something like that, because really we don't have enough people to have a specific person per vehicle. We have a general sort of shop, and it gives us a lot more flexibility with work assignments and that sort of thing. And currently with the charging infrastructure, we've got a group of dual licensed millwright electricians who will do first line maintenance, and then we call in the OEM for support after that. And we're looking at maybe having service contracts down the road to handle that for us, because it is a pretty complex issue. And when are the courses needed? Obviously, they're needed now. Yesterday would have been better. And how many people would we need to run through these? I'd say we have about 100 people currently that we have the demand for now. So that's about all I have to talk about at this point. I appreciate for giving me the time. Thank you.
Hey, Trevor, thanks. I know we have a sale on those service contracts at Siemens, so I really appreciate the quantity of people you identified related to training. We do have some colleges on the session today, and that's part of the reason that Siemens has been partnering with colleges to get course material to them and get the programs developed. Of course, Siemens is assuming a certified electrician, like you mentioned, is working on that equipment, and you mentioned also the millwright characteristics, so really interesting skill set there. So thank you, Trevor. Next up, we have Conestoga College, another tag team, Adam Jarris and Jeff Oakes, where Adam is a professor in the truck and coach side of the school, and Jeff is the chair of the trades and apprenticeship at Conestoga. Both of them are licensed technicians. Jeff? I can see your screen very well. I can't hear you yet, Jeff or Adam.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that.
There you are.
Yes, thank you for having us, Ray. We really appreciate that. And Karen as well. I taught for many years, so I brought props. I apologize in advance. So we just thought we would cover off the questions that you asked from a college perspective on EV training. Adam and I will go back and forth on this. And with that in mind, we'll try to cover as many as we can in 5 minutes. So question and answers. So the question was this: how long and what approvals are needed to develop new curriculum? Well, I think Dan stepped in and was talking about that. We really were looking at it, Adam and I, depending on whether we're focusing on long-term with apprentices or currently with technicians. If we need to get boots on the ground right away, that would be technician training. And we would say that technician curriculum training could probably be developed fairly quickly. We could do something like that with OEs, of course, helping us along with curriculum. That could happen quickly. If it was to be embedded into apprenticeship, that will take a little bit longer, as it has to have ministry approval and, as Dan said, internal approval as well. And our question is, for now, not long-term, but for now, is apprenticeship the right direction? We really tend to see this, the immediate need as technician-focused training, especially when I think of Bill saying that they're going to have EV buses happening relatively soon. So this is, we need the quicker turnaround, which is probably technician training. The next question was this: what is the best way in which bus builders and OEMs transit authorities can assist you with curriculum development? Well, I think before we have curriculum development, I think people need to understand the platform. So once there's some OE level training, then I think curriculum could be written relatively quick. There are a number of us at Conestoga College that have written curriculum, provincial curriculum. I've been on the automotive side. I have a couple other gentlemen who have been on the truck and coach and the heavy equipment side. So curriculum we can write, but we need to know the end goal. So I'll pass this over to Adam, and you'll see us pass out back and forth.
All right, so the next question we were faced with was, what role do you think colleges can play in providing EV training to licensed 310 technicians? Basically, we can offer the space, the location. We've got some very unique opportunities coming down the road that will help with that. Potentially, we can provide some trainers, and that's based on the needs of the program. We can assist with the curriculum development alongside the industry, so that partnership as far as getting the curriculum developed. And then we can also set the standards around the hours, collecting the outcomes. And we kind of saw the approach in somewhat of a multi-stage certification, which has been kind of mirrored here today. And so the example that we're looking at is kind of a 4-stage process. And again, similar to what other people are saying, we're looking at kind of a level 1 introduction to the high voltage safety isolation practices, address the safety component first. Then we want to look at a level 2 certification where we can talk about vehicle maintenance and servicing. So the technicians are, going through these stages and completing each component. Then we get into level 3 where we consider the diagnostic side and the service and repair. And then the 4th component would be kind of an ongoing updating certification where we're looking at, as the industry changes and new technology comes out, we can take that technician and just kind of do some upgrading or some updating as they see fit. And then for us, we also see the ability for the college and the OEM to possibly partner with certifications. We've kind of talked a little bit about provincially, whether it's a license. We can definitely work on what that looks like for training.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So approval times. Dan spoke on this quickly, but we'll just touch on it really quick. There's 3 options that come to mind quickly right now. Others may surface in the future. The first thing is technician training with a certificate of completion, like a level certificate. You are a level 1, level 2, level 3, whatever the manufacturers feel is the correct amount of training required. So we can do a certificate training relatively quickly. Like I said before, if you're looking at embedded ministry curriculum, it's at least 2 years. Josipa mentioned something a little bit quicker, and it's good to see Q-Trick here. That was great. I'm glad to see her presenting. She had a slightly smaller timeline, but that's great. If we could follow that timeline, that would be fine. It takes us a little bit longer to get through the ministry side of things. If it's a separate license, I know right now there's talk about splitting a couple licenses, and I think until the Ontario College of Trades has completely disbanded and the ministry has taken that section over and the new panel that they have, I don't know if that would be a real expedient way to go just yet, but maybe in the future we would look at that. Okay, back to Adam.
So the next question we have is, are there any discussions in making any changes, additions to the current 310 requirement, such as an EV endorsement, similar to what we used to see with the diesel side? Unfortunately, we kind of already touched on this a bit, but there's nothing currently that we're aware of. But again, it's something that we probably can all agree is definitely a good direction to move forward with.
Okay, and then the last one, trying to keep in our timeline right here. What specific courses are available today? Right now, we have a hybrid course. And I know somebody was talking about using a Mega. Sorry, this is kind of blurring, but here's one if you haven't seen one before. We teach our students how to use this, do isolation tests. I don't know why I keep this, Ray. It doesn't make any sense to me, but here's my very first set of high voltage gloves, and they expired in, oh my goodness, well, let's see, probably about August 2010. I keep them for some reason. I can't explain it, but we'll talk offline on that one. So we have a 2-year hybrid course right now that we do teach, excuse me. We have a 2-year course that has hybrid embedded. It's a 42-hour course. It's in our truck and coach and our auto. I taught the course way back in 2014, 2015. And apprenticeship has a little bit of hybrid technologies in it, but there is incredible room for improvement. Now, one thing I just want to say before we finish off, make it 2. If you see behind me, we have a brand new campus that we're floating over apparently. That is to be a trade center for Conestoga College. And our motive power area is actually, the building isn't there yet. It's a distinct build. So this is where we see a great opportunity to partner and have maybe an EV bus training section there, because I'm very much into technician training. I think that would be fabulous. But we need the ministry in here if we're talking about apprentices working solely on EVs, because from the car side, some of my former apprentices went and worked at Tesla, and we had to make special arrangements because Teslas do not meet all the criteria that the ministry has for an apprentice to cover. Fuel tanks, exhaust systems, intake systems. So those are just some of the considerations that are really worth thinking about. Ray, I believe that's it for us. I'll stop sharing and back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Adam. I really appreciate those gloves. I know why I still have a couple of pairs in the garage. It's because I don't throw anything out. So, Karen, I would ask you to help at this time. This is the section where we're opening up to questions from the audience. And rather than having a separate agenda item to talk about volunteers for the OPTA Training Committee, I would just make that plug now to the audience members to access that Survey Monkey to volunteer for active duty in the OPTA Training Committee. And that committee would be focused on training specific to Ontario needs. And so we're encouraging folks to access that link. And Karen, do we have any questions yet submitted into the chat from the audience? I'm not sure.
Good questions about what is the mandate, about the scope of it. There isn't a draft mandate yet. The intention of this webinar today was to open it up to a broad discussion, with all the kind of representatives that we have. I know that QTRIC has mentioned in the past and did again today about a gap analysis, and I think that that's likely one of the first things that needs to be done, and we'll have some offline discussions about that in October. On Wednesday, October 27th, there is the OPTA Maintenance Committee will be meeting, and we've been going back and forth in some of the chats here about whether or not we can have a draft terms of reference for that meeting, or if we're going to do part of the gap analysis with the OPTA Maintenance Committee, have a bit more of a dialogue with both our transit system and our supplier members as part of that event. So there's still a lot more questions than answers, I think, about how we're going to do this. And this was always intended to be the first discussion of many.
Yeah, and hence the need for the training committee, Karen. So we encourage the participation from the audience, and it'd be nice to have the diversity, at least, of what we've had here at this meeting. And, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our panelists for joining, the colleges, of course, the transit authorities and the bus builders. And Mark, thank you for joining as well. So I really appreciate you all sharing your expertise. Josipa, thank you. And so are there questions from the audience to our panelists pertaining to approaches in training? And if there are, could you populate them in the chat group here? We have about 5 minutes left in this webinar. So if we have them, we would pose those questions to the panelists. It's not a chatty group today, Karen.
We do have some questions coming in, though. There's a question about the order of training and a question about how do you choose who gets trained first. I don't know if any of the transit system reps want to talk about that.
And Trevor, you mentioned that you had a process where you trained in series.
Yeah, so for our approach, what we did to choose the first batch of trainees was to choose people who are technically literate, who could give us coverage across all shifts. In the end state, we want to have everyone trained, but we had to pick someone to go first, and those are the folks we picked. And then we'll continue to evolve that as we go.
Our process is very much the same. But as Trevor said, you got to make sure that you got representation from all shifts.
Awesome, Trevor, Bill. Another question we have from Rodney, thank you. Are the colleges developing training courses independently, or is there a concerted effort? And I would volunteer that that's part of the reason that we put together this forum, was to help connect industry stakeholders. I can tell you that Siemens, through myself and Mark, have communicated with about a half a dozen colleges across the country, sharing approximately one day with each of them, sharing what we think could be part of their course curriculum. I'm sure the other bus builders, but I would turn it over, say, to Dan or at St. Clair College. I know, Dan, that we've collaborated a bit on curriculum.
Thank you, Ray. Between the colleges, there has not been a lot of conversation, whether it's a COVID issue or why, I can't tell you. We have been in contact with Red River, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts of where we should go. But I can tell you, I have not reached out to my colleagues at Conestoga or Centennial to work together as a team.
Maybe, Ray, if I can add something also, I think, Dan, your comment is pretty common across the country in terms of colleges coordinating. So when we did our first colleges program in 2016, it was the first time that like BCIT colleagues had met with Red River colleagues, had met with some of the Conestoga Centennial folks, and a couple of the universities that had training engineering programs. And that was 5 years ago. And so the guidance we got from our college members was, that is the job of a consortium. And so, Karen, I think that means our mandate as OPTA and QTRIC is to really make that sharing possible in an easy, streamlined fashion. We do know BCIT in particular, Red River College, of course, St. Clair, Conestoga, Centennial, those are the big names, would want to have that kind of coordination. So we did set up our next ZEB committee for QTRIC, the monthly Zero Emissions Bus Committee, coming up next month, is about renewing this operations maintenance dialogue between colleges, and then Karen hopefully parlaying that into the work stream for this operations and maintenance group for Ontario. But it's a larger issue Canadian-wide, with all the expertise that BCIT has in British Columbia, Red River, Manitoba, and the colleges in Ontario. There's really no reason not to share other than the lack of a mechanism. So to your point, Dan, I think it's our job to help you coordinate that.
Well, that's the leadership I've come to know from you, Josipa. Nice. We have another question from Rolf. Mike Mcdonald, are you available? Do manufacturers currently offer packages of training content, and can this be standardized to some extent?
Yes. So definitely yes is the answer to the first part of your question. And it can be standardized, and I'm sure that, you know, offering a sort of a base level would be the approach to go. But another way that we've kind of looked at it is that no single property is built alike, and so tailoring to specific needs, as long as the customer makes that clear, is something that not only we should be doing, but kind of have to be doing.
Thanks, Mike. Mark, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that that pretty much covers it as well on our side, right?
Hey, thanks, Mark. It's now 2:30. Karen, I would turn it over to you to close off the session.
Well, thank you, Ray, and thank you, Siemens. Again, Siemens stepped forward to identify this issue. A number of folks were going to them for these training questions, and it was obvious that this was something that the entire industry was grappling with, and that makes it a perfect topic for the association. We do work closely with our national partners, both QTRIC and QTA. I know we have folks from both organizations on the line, and so afterward, we'll be taking this back. The biggest theme, I think, from here is about the need to keep sharing and keep discussing in order to produce what the industry needs. So again, thank you to Ray and Teresa and everyone else with Siemens, to the bus OEMs that were able to join today, and others who are on, to our transit system members across North America. In fact, we had quite an international group here with us today. All of the slides will be put to the OPTA website, and the video will also be posted through our YouTube channel. Everyone on here today will receive a follow-up email with all of that information. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks very
Ray.
much.
Karen.
Take care. Bye now.